What if January 1st was never meant to free you, but to keep you predictable? What if that glittering instant when the clock hits midnight is less a spontaneous eruption of joy and more a carefully timed ritual, a public reset button that people around the world press in near-perfect unison? Tonight, billions lift glasses, clutch lists, embrace strangers, and promise a better version of themselves. It looks like hope. It smells like celebration. But if you look at the anatomy of that moment, the countdown, the kiss, the toast, the spectacle, you begin to see patterns. Patterns that produce the same outcome year after year. A burst of intention, a few weeks of discipline, an inevitable slide into guilt, and then a ritualized blank slate. The cycle repeats. Hope, attempt, failure, shame, reset. If that sounds fierce, it's meant to be. I'm going to show you how January 1st functions as ritual and mechanism, the historical scaffolding that put this date where it stands, the symbolic logic that makes midnight so compelling, the psychological engineering baked into public resolutions, and the collective effects that multiply those individual failures into a cultural rhythm. I will not tell you the calendar was invented by some single villain with a master plan. That would be lazy. Instead, I'll trace the slow accumulation of political decisions, religious accommodations, and social technologies that made January 1st a moment of mass alignment. Then we'll pull apart the ritual itself, why it works, why it often doesn't, and what to do instead. If this matters to you and December 31st is coming, save or share this now. You might want to use these ideas before the date arrives. To understand why a single night carries so much psychic weight, we have to start with time itself, the systems humans invented to order it. The Roman story is not a conspiracy so much as a pivot point. Early Roman tradition remembers a 10-month calendar that began in March and ended with December. October, November. December still bear the numerical echoes of that older system. According to later Roman historians, Numa Pompilius, a king said to have reigned in the 8th century BCE, was credited with adding January and February to smooth out a calendar that had drifted from seasonal reality. Whether Numa did every bit of that work exactly as the legends tell, it is debated, but the symbolic move mattered. January, named for Janus, the god of gates and doorways, became associated with thresholds, with looking back and forward, with liminal beginnings. Jump forward to the 1st century BCE, Julius Caesar, confronting the practical chaos of a political calendar that no longer matched Earth's seasons, instituted a sweeping reform in 46 BCE that created the Julian calendar, a solar calendar meant to stabilize administrative life across a sprawling polity. It was a bureaucratic fix that carried cultural consequences. The months were redistributed, the year was regularized, and the rhythm of Roman civic life was increasingly synchronized across territories. Over a millennium later, Pope Gregory XIII adjusted that system again in 1582 to correct accumulated errors. The Gregorian calendar we now use tightened the alignment with the equinox and, over centuries, was spread through trade, missionizing, conquest and administration. The result is not simple evil. It is the slow densification of a particular time grid across the world. There is symbolism at every layer of that story. Janus, two-faced and both backward and forward-looking, gives January its mythic charge. The idea that one day can be the hinge between who you were and who you'll be. Saturnalia, the older December festival honoring Saturn, carried its own inversion rituals, role reversals, license, feasting, and it left traces in how winter holidays later expressed social release. Over time, those mythic and social residues folded into civic calendars and, crucially, into public spectacles that make the moment of transition feel communal, sanctioned, and important. So what happens when you take centuries of administrative standardization, a mythic shorthand about beginnings, and an ever more powerful public culture of spectacle and projection? You get a globalized night of synchronized consent. Midnight is not just a time, it is a boundary experienced together. The countdown is not merely a marker, it is a synchronized act of agreement. The whole world, leaning into the same 0 point, is the equivalent of a mass behavioral experiment, a brief, repeated convergence of attention and intention. And that convergence has predictable psychological effects. Think about the ritual mechanics for a moment. The countdown compresses attention into a single vector, 10, 9, 8, the soundtrack of 1,000 personal resolutions. The crowd anticipates. Anticipation increases arousal. Arousal lowers the threshold for decisive action. People make vows, they make promises, they declare new identities in the heat of a collective instant. The champagne toast is more than festivity, it is a communal sealing. The kiss is reunion masquerading as commitment. The ball drop and televised spectacles turn private resolution into public theatre. You are not only promising yourself, you are promising an audience. Public commitment increases the social pressure to try, which feels motivating. But it also intensifies the humiliation if you fail. The psychological pattern is well documented. Researchers looking at New Year's resolutions routinely find a large gap between intent and sustained change. Studies suggest that only a minority of resolution makers actually stick to their goals for the long term. The often cited figure that roughly 8% of people keep their resolution has been reported in popular summaries of research by teams like those at the University of Scranton. That figure depends on methodology, sample, and definition of success. But the broader signal is clear. Most annual declarations do not produce long-term transformation. Why? One reason lies in how willpower works. Theories of self-control, famously the ego depletion model proposed by social psychologists like Roy Baumeister and colleagues, argued that willpower is a finite resource that can be exhausted by prior exertion. That model had influential experimental support and intuitive appeal. If you expend self-control all day, you have less available at night to resist temptation. However, the ego depletion literature has also faced replication challenges and debate. More recent work suggests the story is more complicated, involving motivation, beliefs about willpower, and context. In practice, for many people, the dramatic peak of motivation on January 1st collides with everyday realities: job stress, relationship demands, sleep deprivation, and the slow attrition of small obstacles. Motivation spikes. Follow-through requires systems. Identity matters too. Behavioral researchers have increasingly emphasized identity-based change, interventions that help people see themselves as a different kind of person. I am a runner rather than I will run, are more durable than episodic promises. A single night declaration rarely accomplishes identity shift. It may trigger an aspirational narrative. This year I will be different. But without the scaffolding of repeated micro-actions that integrate new behaviors into the self-concept, the declaration floats as an unmet ideal. Public rituals compound these individual vulnerabilities into social phenomena. When everyone treats January 1st as an obligatory rebirth, failure ceases to be an isolated disappointment and becomes a cultural script. First, you ritualize hope, then you internally log failure, then you await the next cycle to signal your repentance and intention. This loop creates two consequences. First, it normalizes cyclic attempts rather than incremental change. Second, it institutionalizes shame. Shame is a powerful regulator. It encourages concealment and silence, and it fuels industries that promise quick fixes. Those industries are enormous. Think of the alignment of publishers, fitness brands, diet programs, planners, apps, and even the retail sector with the January spike in motivation. There is a commercial ecosystem that anticipates and amplifies the ritual. Sales of gym memberships, self-help books, and New Year programs climb in January. Marketing calendars are built around that annual pulse. The phenomenon is modern capitalism taking advantage of a predictable synchronization of human attention and desire. That doesn't make it an evil conspiracy. It makes it a market response to demand, baked into social rhythms that are themselves products of centuries of calendar making, religious observance, and civic scheduling. Layer onto that the socialization patterns of childhood. Many of us grew up with a cultural script that tied moral progress to time markers. When you misbehaved, adults would say, "You'll do better next year," or "Wait until the new year." That phrasing trains a child to externalize self-improvement into a future temporal certificate. It teaches delay by default. Don't fix this now. Change when the calendar gives you a license. Over decades, that kind of programming fosters a version of selfhood that looks for external authorization to begin again. And that external authorization conveniently arrives every December. If the ritual of January 1st functions as a program, the question is, by whom and for what? The most rigorous answer resists simple villainy. Administrative efficiency, religious accommodation, and social theatricality are all plausible motives, not a single conspiratorial design. Yet whether intentional or emergent, the effect is similar. A globalized annual mechanism that concentrates change attempts into a narrow temporal window and magnifies their social visibility. When you concentrate attempts, you also concentrate failures. And when a culture repeatedly fails in the same way, it produces a learned helplessness that feels almost structural. There is a further dimension that complicates the picture, the idea of collective synchronization as measurable phenomenon. Some researchers have attempted to detect measurable correlated changes in global systems during major collective events. One well-known initiative, the Global Consciousness Project, GCP, based at Princeton and run by independent researchers, analyzed data from networks of random number generators, looking for statistical anomalies during global events like mass meditations, disasters, and major media occurrences. The GCP reports correlations that its proponents interpret as evidence of distributed attention affecting physical systems. Critics highlight methodological issues and the difficulty of causal inference. Similarly, groups like the HeartMath Institute study how large-scale coherence in heart rate variability among groups might reflect or foster collective states. Their work points to interesting correlations between emotional states and physiological coherence, but the interpretation and generalization of those findings remain contested in mainstream science. Why mention controversial research at all? Because contested or not, the belief that our attention can become collectively coherent matters. Human beings change behavior based on perceptions. If enough people believe that mass attention creates a field, whether you frame it as energetic, informational, or purely metaphorical, they will behave as if that field exists. That behavior changes systems. In other words, the perception of collective power is itself a mechanism of cultural change, regardless of whether you accept the specific physical claims. So when billions orient to a single symbolic boundary, midnight on January 1st, that alignment has social consequences even if the precise causal chain remains debated. Consider the imagery often used around New Year's Eve. Liminality, thresholds, and rituals of sealing. The night itself is a twilight of time, the old year dying, the new one being born. Liminal moments create openness. They reduce resistance to novelty. Ritual designers exploit this openness. They give people a script. The countdown is a script. The toast is an embodied script. The kiss is an embodied script. These scripts do work. They help people create narrative continuity, a line connecting past and future, which can be psychologically stabilizing. but they also outsource responsibility for timing change. When your internal calendar says reset at midnight, your internal agency is waiting for external punctuation. There is one more hidden mechanic at play in public resolutions. The cost of failure is social and cumulative. Fail publicly, and you risk shame. Fail privately, and you must carry cognitive dissonance alone. Both outcomes encourage a private economy of second chances, a secret list of new starts postponed until the next January. That cultural pattern buys entire markets months of business. It keeps the cycle alive. Let me give you a vignette, not as a confession, but as a case study in socialization. Imagine a child named Maya, growing up in a middle-class suburb. Every New Year's Eve, her parents would gather with friends, blowing horns and reciting the same litany. This year we'll get healthier. This year we'll be more organized. This year things will change. Maya learned that night as an annual promise day. At 9, she wrote a list and felt proud. At 12, she tried and for the first time failed to keep a resolution. At 15, the lists turned into private shame. At 21, she stopped making public promises, but still felt the invisible pressure at year-end. An itch to make herself over. That coincided with the calendar, not with deeper readiness. The pattern is common. The externalized ritual teaches you to treat time as the enabler of moral renewal rather than the context in which change gradually occurs. The good news is that these patterns, as durable as they look, are mutable. Rituals are human-made. You can deconstruct them. You can create counter-rituals. The problem is less that the night exists, and more that we give it a monopoly over new beginnings. What if we broke that monopoly? What if we turned the attention that is concentrated on December 31st into distributed practices that build identity, not just intention? Before we get to practices, and I will give you detailed step-by-step protocols, there is one more historical wrinkle worth clarifying because it reveals how layered our calendar system is. The Gregorian reform of 1582 adjusted the Julian calendar because the Julian year was slightly too long. Over centuries, the equinox drifted. The reform removed 10 days from the calendar at its introduction and changed the rules for leap years. Adoption was uneven. Catholic countries moved quickly. Many Protestant and Orthodox regions adopted the reform much later. The result was centuries of patchwork, multiple New Year observances, and localized resistance. When empires and colonial administrations later extended the Gregorian calendar into colonies, they did more than unify dates. They also compressed diverse temporalities into a single administrative rhythm. Local festivals, lunar cycles, and agrarian seasons were not erased, but often subordinated to the imperial timetable. Calendar standardization is administrative convenience with cultural cost. That cultural cost is visible when you look at societies whose ritual calendars are tied to lunar cycles or agricultural seasons. For a rice farmer, harvest seasons dictate productive rhythms. For a coastal community, tides and monsoon cycles rule the year. Translating those communities into a Roman-derived, solar-centric calendar inevitably introduced dissonance, a moral and practical realignment that favored administrative legibility over ecological attunement. The colonization of time is therefore both metaphor and reality. It rewires expectation. The scene of the Times Square ball drop captures how modern media technologies repackage ancient myths into mass spectacle. The ball drop was first introduced in 1907 as a signal device, replacing fireworks in a crowded urban environment. It became a trademarked ritual that television would later commodify and transmit globally. The spectacle converts private transition into broadcast event. When you tune in, you are participating in a mediated ritual that synchronizes households across time zones. The technology amplifies the psychological effects I described above: synchronized attention, collective expectation, and the social magnification of individual promises. All of this adds up to one clear point. January 1st is not a neutral temporal coordinate. It is a focal point of practices and narratives that have built up over millennia. That makes it powerful. And power can be used intentionally or not to shape behaviors and markets. But power can also be reclaimed. Before we move into concrete protocols for reclaiming that night, let's briefly review the scientific and behavioral landscape that explains why annual resets tend to fail and how to avoid the traps. We already touched on willpower as a constrained resource and on identity-based change as more promising than episodic declarations. There is more to the picture. Habit formation is not a moment, it's a process. Classic research suggests that forming a new habit can take weeks to months of repetition, and the time depends on the complexity of the behavior. Small, repeated actions compound into identity shifts because they alter how you perceive yourself. Behavioral economists and psychologists also tell us that immediate rewards shape behavior more strongly than distant ones. The New Year's model often promises distant payoff. In 12 months I'll be transformed, while in practice, most people respond to immediate feedback loops. That mismatch between aspiration and reward structure is fatal for many resolutions. Social accountability is double-edged. Publicly stating a goal can increase initial compliance due to reputation concerns, but it can also produce a premature sense of accomplishment. Declaring an identity publicly without having built the underlying habits can satisfy the need for social recognition and reduce the drive to persist. That's why modern habit literature often advises micro-commitments, tiny, repeatable actions that create immediate positive feedback and are easy to do in nearly any context. Micro-commitments leverage momentum. They build automaticity. There are also cognitive biases at play. Planning fallacy leads us to underestimate the time required to accomplish goals. Optimism bias makes us overconfident in our future self's motivation. And the end-of-year retrospection process skews recall in ways that make us both more ambitious and less realistic. Combine those biases with the ritual intensity of January 1st, and you have a predictable emotional roller coaster. We must also avoid oversimplification about the social psychological dynamics. Not every person or culture experiences January 1st as a trap. For some, the date is legitimately meaningful. It can provide structure, signal community intentions, and catalyze supportive behaviors. If a community uses the date to synchronize constructive, realistic change and supports members through the slippery second month, the ritual can be beneficial. My case is not to abolish communal ritual, but to interrogate default patterns and offer alternatives. Ritual can be powerful medicine when used consciously. It can be anesthetic when used unconsciously. Finally, when people invoke energy or fields in relation to mass synchronization, remember to treat those ideas as interpretive lenses. The Global Consciousness Project and HeartMath's research are intriguing precisely because they push our intuitions about collective attention. They should be discussed with caveats about methodology, replicability, and interpretation. Even so, the perception that our collective focusing matters is itself potent. People who act as if mass attention creates momentum change social realities, and those changes are measurable in more mundane ways. Shifts in consumer behavior, increased sign-ups for programs, spikes in charitable giving at year-end, surges in gym enrollments. Whether those shifts are caused by a physical field or by coordinated human behavior, the macro pattern is real. At this point you might be thinking, this is bleak. A calendar turned into a ritualized machine that produces predictable psychological failure and an industry ready to capitalize on it. That is one way to read it. But there is another way, a more urgent and liberating one. If the mechanism is human-made, it is alterable. If the script is learned, it can be unlearned. And if synchronization is the problem, you can redirect synchronization towards something different. In the next section, I will lay out concrete practices to neutralize the ritual, reclaim celebration, and build habits that honor your agency rather than outsource it. You will get step-by-step language for a neutralization statement you can use on December 31st, a method for creating weekly micro-improvements that add up, guided exercises to anchor yourself in the present moment instead of the calendar, a calendar audit exercise to reveal where your time allegiance lies, and a ritual called the resolution graveyard, for respectfully letting go of failed commitments. I will also explain how to organize midnight rebellion alternatives, small intentional collective acts that reclaim the night, and how to do a time fast to reconnect with natural rhythms. But before I hand you step-by-step tools, it's important to make two more points. First, none of these practices are magic. I won't promise overnight freedom or guaranteed transformation. They are techniques, human-designed, proven in various contexts to increase agency and reduce shame, that require practice. Second, intention without structure fails. That is the central diagnosis of the New Year's ritual. We need both heart and scaffolding. Ritual without structure is theatrical. Structure without meaning is mechanical. The aim here is to combine both. To prepare you, here is a short exercise you can do right now to test how the ritual affects you personally. Sit quietly and recall the last time you set a New Year's resolution. Where did you make the list? On paper, on your phone, aloud? How public was it? How soon did the intensity wane? Rate your experience. How much of the change was externally prompted, social pressure, marketing, and how much came from internal conviction? This inventory is not a judgment. It's data. It tells you whether your change attempts are primarily reactive to a calendar or rooted in a developing identity. As you do that inventory, notice the emotions that arise. Do you feel relief at the idea of starting fresh? Do you feel a pang of shame for past failures? Do you feel energized or resigned? Emotions are signposts, not verdicts. They indicate where a mechanical ritual has bypassed your agency. When you can name the emotions, you can begin to choose a different movement. Now hold that felt sense for a moment. Imagine an alternative beginning. Instead of waiting for a calendar signal to declare a new self, you choose to enact a micro-habit tomorrow. One small act that takes less than 5 minutes and aligns with your values. Imagine doing that micro-habit weekly, then daily, until it becomes part of who you are. Imagine a community you trust who will celebrate increments rather than ceremonial resets. Imagine a calendar that you edit to reflect cycles that matter to your life, moon phases, seasons, project timelines, rather than only the imperial grid. These are not abstract fantasies. They are the scaffolding we'll build next. But first, one last historical aside. Rituals are not destroyed by analysis alone. The power of ritual lies in its felt, embodied enactment. To change a ritual is to invent and repeat another ritual, one that channels the same emotional energy but towards sustained autonomy-enhancing practices. That is the task ahead. We will map specific practices, the exact wording for neutralization statements, the micro-commitments that replace New Year's mega-declarations, and the community structures that amplify resilience rather than shame. When you return, we will start with the first protocol, January 1st, neutralization. I will give you a script to say aloud, a breathing pattern to anchor the declaration, and variations for different contexts. Family dinners, crowded parties, solitary walks. We'll explore the calendar audit in detail, with a template to reveal where your attention is currently pledged and how to reassign it. We'll outline a weekly micro-improvement system with concrete examples for fitness, creativity, relationships, and work. We'll practice a present-moment anchor exercise you can use in the middle of any day when the year's inertia feels oppressive. For now, hold the image of midnight as both trap and threshold. Midnight can be a closure that resets an old pattern, or it can be the screen on which you project yet another rehearsed dream. The difference is whether you consent, consciously or unconsciously, to that projection. Unlocking the ancient ritual begins with refusing automatic consent. It continues with choosing what you will synchronize to, external spectacle or inner-directed practice. The choice is the hinge. The next step is practical. Precise language, stepwise ritual design, and small acts that recode identity. Here is the precise practical work. The scripts, the exercises, the practices you can use to neutralize the annual reset and replace it with a structure that actually grows identity instead of harvesting shame. Each practice below includes rationale, step-by-step instructions, expected experience, and caveats. Use them in sequence or pick the ones that fit your life. January 1st, neutralization, exact language, steps and variations. Why this works? If January 1st functions as an externally enforced hinge, the first act of sovereignty is to withdraw unconscious consent. The neutralization ritual is short, public or private as you choose, and designed to convert a performative obligation into conscious refusal, and then to redirect the energy toward a different practice. Script to say aloud, short version. Tonight I refuse the default reset. I release the habit of outsourcing my beginnings to a calendar. I will not let a date determine my worth. From now on, I will steward my change with small acts, clear accountability, and compassion for the long haul. Script to say aloud, expanded, with boundary. On this night, I decline the automatic rebirth. I refuse to let a spectacle decide what I owe myself. I release the ritual of guilt that follows every public promise. I choose instead deliberate beginnings, weekly steps, honest measurement, and community that holds me with dignity. I withdraw consent from the old cycle. I will begin when I am ready, and I will keep going when it is hard. Step-by-step neutralization, solo. 1. Choose your moment. Near midnight, at first light, or earlier in the evening. Pick whatever feels real for you. 2. Find a simple anchor. Stand, sit, or hold a cup of tea. Make the environment minimally distracting. 3. Center. Take 3 slow breaths, letting your attention land in your body. Notice the year's residue, a tightness, an apology, a wish. 4. Speak the script out loud. Use the expanded version if you want a fuller break. Use the short version if you want something discreet. 5. Name one tangible micro-action you'll commit to this week, one that takes 3 to 10 minutes. Speak it aloud. This week, I will write 10 minutes 3 times. This turns the declaration into immediate practice. 6. Seal the moment. Write the date and the micro-action on a single index card. Keep it where you will see it in the next days. Step-by-step neutralization in a party. 1. If you're among friends, ask for 60 seconds of attention. If you cannot ask, speak into your pocket or whisper to yourself and commit the micro-action. 2. Use the short script. Keep it simple and declarative. 3. Invite one person to be a witness. Witnessing reduces the compulsion to re-perform for virtue signaling and increases real accountability. 4. If you prefer public theater, replace the shared toast with a communal neutralization. Each person speaks one small step they will take in the next 7 days. Family variation. 1. If family pressure is strong, pre-frame the moment. I'm doing a small ritual at midnight. I want witnesses, not advice. 2. Use the expanded script and end with, I will tell you only how things go when I need help. 3. If family members insist on grand promises, politely decline. You can say, I am not doing a year-long vow tonight. I'm doing a weekly experiment. I'll update you when I have something to report. Caveats and expected experience. Expect relief and also friction. Neutralization will feel like refusal. Some people will be puzzled or dismissive. That is normal. The neutralization is not magic. It is a boundary change that must be followed by practice. If you feel intense anxiety around rejecting social customs, scale the practice down. Whisper the script alone. Commit to one micro-action. Calendar audit. How to find out who your calendar serves. Why this works. Most people live by a timetable they inherited. A calendar audit reveals where your attention and value flows actually go. How to perform a calendar audit. 1-hour template. Want to print or open your calendars. Include digital calendars, work schedulers, school timetables, ritual calendars, and social event lists. 2. Create 4 columns on paper or a document. Obligations, commitments that matter, rituals, noise, extraction. 3. For 1 week, log every scheduled block of time and which column it belongs to. Example entries: 6:30, 7:15 exercise, commitment that matters; 8 to 9 commute, obligation; 12 to 1 lunch with team, obligation; 8 to 9 p.m. scrolling, noise, extraction. 4. At the end of the week, identify 3 things that are noise extraction, calendar items that do not serve your values but that consume attention. 5. Ask 2 questions for each remaining block. Who assigned this time? What value does it produce for me? If an item serves someone else but not you, decide whether to opt out, delegate, or reframe it as required. 6. Reassign 2 blocks of time to self-directed experiments, 10 to 30-minute slots, where you try 1 micro-habit each week. Deeper audit, seasonal. 1. Map the next 3 months by seasons and projects. Note where you are aligned with natural cycles, project planning, harvest, sleep quality, and where you are misaligned, launching creative work during known low-energy months. 2. For each misalignment, choose 1 small adjustment. Move deep focus work to your high-energy days. Schedule administrative tasks in your low-energy slots. Expected benefits and caveats. You will likely find many small leaks of attention. That discovery can be alarming. Treat it as data, not a moral failure. This audit will show where the imperial time grid or social expectations govern you. Use it to reassign sovereignty slowly. Weekly micro-improvement system, the alternative to the once-a-year mega declaration. Why this works. Habits grow through repetition and immediate feedback. Weekly cycles produce a rhythm that is both scalable and forgiving. Structure, the basic cadence. 1. Set a weekly focus. 1 domain, health, flow, relationship, skill. 2. Define 1 micro-habit for that week. 1 action, 3 to 15 minutes daily or 3 times a week. 3. Schedule the micro-habit into specific times. Habit stacking works best. Attach it to an existing routine. 4. Do a quick end-of-week review on the same day every week. 5 to 15 minutes to record wins, obstacles, and 1 adjustment. 5. Celebrate 1 small increment publicly or privately. Issue a small ritual, a sticker, a 5-minute playlist, a proper meal. Examples by domain: fitness, micro-habit, 3 sets of 5 bodyweight squats in the morning. Stack with after I brush my teeth. Weekly review, record total days completed, add 1 extra rep next week. Creativity, micro-habit, write 250 words on 3 days this week. Stack with after my morning coffee. Weekly review, pick 1 excerpt to keep. And D, relationships, micro-habit, send 1 sincere text to a friend each week. Stack with after dinner. Weekly review, notice qualitative changes. Work, micro-habit, spend 20 minutes block time on your most important task twice a week. Stack with first calendar block. Implementation details, keep commitments so small they feel trivial. The goal is identity shift. I am someone who shows up for 5 minutes. Use a tracking system, a simple checklist, or a lightweight app. The feedback matters more than the tool. Weekly review prompts. What worked? What got in the way? What will I adjust next week? Who will I tell to celebrate or to hold me accountable? Expected experience and caveats. Progress will feel slow at first. That is intended. Small wins compound. If you overcommit, you will recreate the cycle of shame. Tiny is not a cop-out. It's a strategy. Present moment anchors. Short exercises to ground attention away from calendar magic. Why this works. Ritual efficacy relies on arousal and narrative. Present moment anchors move the ground state from future-oriented anxiety to embodied steadiness. Practice A. 5 cents reset. 2 to 5 minutes. 1. Name silently 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell or imagine smelling, and 1 thing you can taste. 2. After you complete the sequence, choose 1 micro-action for the next 10 minutes. Practice B. Pocket pause. 60-90 seconds. 1. Stop and place a hand on your heart or belly. 2. Breathe slowly 2 to 4 times, noticing the inhale and the exhale. 3. Restate 1 value aloud. I value curiosity, or I value presence. Practice C. The habit anchor. Link 1. Pick an existing habit you do daily, e.g., making coffee. 2. Before performing it, say 1 line, "This moment is mine." That line creates a micro-ritual that cuts the automatic thread to the calendar. Expected effects and caveats. Anchors reduce reactivity and make your actions more deliberate. They are not a cure for deep anxiety. If you experience clinical anxiety, combine these with professional support. Natural rhythm attunement. Aligning projects and practices with moon, season, and body. Why this matters? The Roman-derived solar grid is one valid mapping of time, but it is not the only one that grounds human bodies and ecosystems. Natural rhythms offer complementary anchors for sustained practice. How to start? Moon cycle method. 1. Find a simple lunar calendar app or paper chart. Track the new moon, first quarter, full moon, and last quarter for 1 cycle, about 29.5 days. 2. Assign tasks to phases. New moon. Set intentions and plan small experiments. First quarter. Take visible action and iterate. Full moon. Review progress, celebrate, adapt. Last quarter. Let go, gratitude, rest. 3. Work in 4-week cycles. Goals set at new moon, actions sharpened at first quarter, evaluation at full moon, release at last quarter. Seasonal alignment 1. Quarterly planning. Instead of a January mega-plan, set goals on equinoxes and solstices or at quarter marks that fit your environment. 2. Example for creative professionals. Winter, incubation, spring, prototyping, summer, production, fall, launch and harvest. Body-centered attunement. 1. Track energy levels for 2 weeks. Note high and low times in the day. Use that to place demanding tasks in your high-energy blocks. 2. Build rest into your rhythm. Productive sprints, followed by rest windows, create sustainable momentum. Expected experience and caveats. Natural rhythms will not align with all work obligations. Use them to schedule discretionary tasks and to plan recovery. Cultural and geographic differences matter. Adapt seasonality to your hemisphere and vocation. Resolution graveyard. A ritual to let go without shame. Why this works? People accumulate failed promises. Storing them as graveyard items honors the attempt and allows closure, not avoidance. How to perform a resolution graveyard. 1. Gather all old resolutions, lists and planner pages that contain unmet goals. 2. Prepare a small container or a digital folder named Resolution Graveyard. 3. One by one, read each resolution aloud and then make a short inscription. Attempted because, and lesson. 4. Place the paper in the box or drag the digital list to the folder with a ritual phrase, "Thank you for the attempt. I release the need to keep this as a wound." 5. If you wish, bury the physical papers in soil, drop them in flowing water where allowed, or burn them safely and respectfully. If not, seal them and store them away. Variation for those who need a less symbolic route. 1. Create a digital note titled Resolution Lessons, and for each failed attempt list, the barrier and the micro-step you'll take instead. 2. End with one sentence that reframes the archive. These are my experiments, not my verdicts. Expected benefits and caveats. Closure reduces the shame loop and allows integration. Do not use the graveyard as a way to avoid accountability. It is a transitional exercise, not a permanent erasure. Midnight Rebellion. Alternatives. How to reclaim the night with intentional small-scale collective acts. Why this matters. You do not have to join the spectacle to participate in meaningful, synchronizing ritual. Replace mass consent with distributed, purposeful acts. Examples of midnight rebellions. 1. The neighbor walk. Gather a small group and walk quietly for 15 minutes at midnight, each person carrying a small light. The walk is silent or lightly conversational. The point is shared witness rather than spectacle. 2. The gratitude bell. Each household rings a small bell 3 times at midnight and speaks one sentence of gratitude aloud. 3. The micro-action toast. Instead of promising a year-long life overhaul, each participant names one action they will take this week and commits to reporting back in 7 days. Then they clink non-alcoholic glasses and stop. How to organize? 1. Use social platforms, neighborhood apps or text groups to invite up to 12 people. 2. Set a simple code of conduct. Brevity, no shaming, no publicizing failures without consent. 3. Follow up with a weekly check-in channel where members post 1 to 2 sentence progress notes, caveats and expected experience. These rebellions may feel anticlimactic at first. That makes them sustainable. They cultivate real social scaffolding rather than performative grandstanding. Time fasting, a deliberate break from calendar-driven media and marketing. Why this helps? Much of the January energy is manipulated by marketing rhythms. A time fast reduces susceptibility to external triggers. Simple time fast protocol, 48 hours. 1. Choose a low-demand weekend or a designated 2-day window. 2. Define your fast boundaries. No promotional emails, no New Year's programs, limited social media. 3. Replace consumption with production. Read, walk, tinker, practice micro-habits, or do a creative sprint. 4. At the end of the fast, journal 3 observations about how marketing shaped your impulses. Progressive time fast, 1 week. On taper, reduce social media time by 50% and unsubscribe from marketing emails that play on New Year urgency. 2. Keep a decision log. Every time you feel the urge to buy or overcommit because of New Year messaging, write the impulse down and delay action by 48 hours. Caveats. Time fasting is not avoidance of necessary tasks. Maintain work obligations and safety checks. If you have work that requires social listening, adapt the boundaries. Etymology awareness. Why words matter and how to use them. Why this works. Language frames perception. Recognizing the origin and function of terms like resolution, renewal, reset, and deadline helps you choose words that work for you. Practice. 1. Pick 3 commonly used phrases you hear at year-end. New Year's resolution. Turn over a new leaf. Start fresh. 2. Look up the root meanings. For example, resolution implies solving, renewal implies restoration, deadline historically carried lethal connotations but now signals urgency. 3. Replace a loaded word with a precise one. Swap resolution for experiment or micro-commitment. Notice how the replacement changes your affect and willingness to try. Expected impact. Small shifts in labeling can reduce moral load and reframe failure as iteration. Eternal now practice, cultivating presence as the default frame. Why this matters? The calendar promises future conversion. Eternal now practice trains you to locate agency in the present. Practice A. Weekly 5-minute inventory. 1. Once a week, sit and ask, what is one thing I can change this week that aligns with my values? 2. Do that thing within 48 hours. Practice B. The 30-second recalibration. 1. Several times a day ask, what resonates with my values in this moment? Act on one small alignment, value alignment. Check how to make resolutions that are identity realistic. Why this matters. Real change adheres to values. The check prevents yearly proclamations disconnected from personal reality. How to perform a value alignment check, 20-30 minutes. 1. List your top 5 values, e.g., clarity, connection, learning, health. 2. For each value, write one behavior that expresses it. Example, value, chuck learning, behavior, chuck read one chapter twice a week. 3. For each behavior, create the smallest repeatable action that would make the behavior automatic. 4. Choose one such action to pilot for 4 weeks. Expected experience and caveat. Values sometimes change. Update your list quarterly. Avoid laundry lists. Focus on 1-3 values to begin. Community of sovereignty. Building supportive networks. Why this is essential. Ritual proves its strength when backed by sustained social support rather than a single night of mass performativity. How to form a community. 1. Gather 6 to 12 people who are committed to micro-practices. 2. Set terms, weekly check-ins, no shaming, structured accountability. Report 1 micro-step per week. 3. Create a short initiation ritual. Each member states 1 micro-commitment and 1 way the group can help. 4. Keep the group small and consistent for at least 3 months. Activities to do together. Shared micro-challenges. 30-day micro-habit. Quarterly reflection calls to align the next season's focus. Mutual celebration rituals that honor effort and progress. Caveats. Watch for dynamics that reproduce hierarchy or shaming. The group's design should privilege compassion and curiosity. Guided exercises. 6 fully fleshed examples. Below are 6 expanded guided exercises you can use immediately. Each is written so you can follow in real time and adapt to context. 1. Neutralization with witness, 10-15 minutes. Set. Choose a private room or a quiet corner at a gathering. Invite one trusted witness or do it alone if necessary. Process. Sit and notice how your body feels when you think of January 1st. Tightness, excitement, dread. Name it in 1 sentence. Speak the neutralization script, short or expanded. State 1 micro-action to begin tomorrow. Example, this week I will write for 10 minutes on Tuesday and Thursday. Ask your witness to only ask 1 question. What is the first small step you will take? This keeps focus on action. Agree on a check-in. A single text in 7 days that says, here if you did it. Expected response. The ritual acknowledges cultural pressure, creates a new boundary, and turns a symbolic refusal into immediate practice. Caveat. If you cannot find a witness, use technology. Send the micro-action in a message to yourself or schedule a calendar reminder as an accountability device. 2. Calendar audit and reassignment, 60-90 minutes. Set. Bring all your calendars and a notebook. Process. Follow the calendar audit template above. Identify 3 items you can remove this month. Create 2 self-directed experiment slots and block them in your calendar now. Choose a weekly review time and create that recurring event. Expected response, clarity about where your attention goes, and the first act of reclaiming 2 time blocks. Caveat: structural obligations may limit changes. Focus on incremental shifts. 3. Weekly micro-improvement pilot, 30-45 minutes to set up, 5 to 15 minutes weekly. Set. Choose one domain and commit to a 4-week pilot. Process. Define the micro-habit clearly. 3x WWK, 10 minutes each. Schedule exact times and attach to existing routines. During the week, use the pocket pause before the habit to anchor. At the weekly review, record completion and adjust if needed. Expected response, momentum through tiny wins, modest changes in identity. Caveat: expect inconsistency, adjust frequency instead of abandoning the habit. 4. Moon cycle project planning, 45 to 60 minutes. Set. Get a lunar calendar and a project idea. Process. At a new moon, map a simple 4-phase plan across the cycle. Plan, act, review, celebrate, release. Break the plan into daily micro-actions. At full moon, do a short public share, social post or group check-in. Expected response. The project benefits from built-in milestones and ritualized review. Caveat: not all projects suit lunar cycles. Use for creative or developmental work. 5. Resolution graveyard, 20-30 minutes. Set. Collect old lists and old planners. Process. Read each resolution and write the lesson in 1 sentence. Place the paper in the container and say the farewell phrase. Close the container and store it away for 3 months. Revisit only to salvage useful lessons. Expected response, relief and integration. Caveat: the exercise is symbolic. Concrete changes require subsequent micro-habits. 6. Midnight rebellion, neighborhood gratitude walk, 30 minutes. Set. Invite up to a dozen neighbors for a 15-20 minute walk around the block. Process. Meet at 11:50 p.m. Briefly state the purpose. We gather to witness and give thanks, not to promise overnight change. Walk quietly for the first round. On the second loop, each person says 1 line of gratitude. End with the neutralization script or a short communal phrase. Expected response, a shared low-pressure ritual that builds community and replaces spectacle with presence. Caveat: respect local safety rules and quiet hours. How to measure progress without year-end drama. Why measurement matters. Scale-time rituals claim authority through dramatic endpoints. Meaningful measurement is frequent, small, and tied to behavior, not moralizing. Suggested simple metrics. Completion rate. How many times did you perform the micro-habit this week? Feelings log. Rate your satisfaction with the micro-habit. 1 to 5. Energy mapping. Note whether the habit changed your perceived energy by the end of the week. Weekly review template, 5 to 10 minutes. What did I do? Count. What felt good? What got in the way? 1 adjustment for next week. The psychology you can lean on. Why this system works in psychological terms. Small habits create identity through repeated experience. Social accountability protects motivation. Immediate feedback strengthens neural pathways. The ritual of January 1st leverages temporal punctuation. Your system leverages repeated punctuation at a pace your brain can sustain. A brief, careful word on the Global Consciousness Project and HeartMath, why I include them. The idea that collective attention shifts systems is a lens many people use to explain why mass rituals feel momentous. What researchers say, the Global Consciousness Project collects data from distributed random number generators and reports statistical deviations during major global events. Proponents interpret correlated anomalies as evidence of distributed attention affecting physical systems. HeartMath Institute documents correlations between emotional states and heart rate variability And they study coherence in groups, noting physiological patterns associated with calm focus and social connection. Caveats: both areas generate debate. Critics point to methodological challenges and difficulties with causal inference. These findings are intriguing but contested. The relevant takeaway is not a metaphysical claim but a behavioral one. If people believe their communal attention matters, they act in ways that produce social consequences. Belief shapes action. Action changes systems. Childhood programming and socialization. What to look out for. Why this matters. Early social scripts normalize the calendar as a moral authority. Red flags in your internal script. I'll start next year as a chronic deferral mechanism. Moral language around timelines. I'm a failure this year. Reliance on external permission for rest or reset. How to rescript. Replace I'll start next year with what is one tiny step I can do this week. When shame rises, use the present moment anchor and speak a compassionate sentence to yourself. Introduce a public ritual of progress reporting that celebrates process rather than ideal outcomes. Practical examples and short vignettes. Maya returns. After neutralizing the night in her 20s, she tried weekly micro-improvements, 5 minutes of piano practice 3 times a week. At first it felt insignificant. By month 3 she could play 1 song. The important change was not the song but the identity shift. She now saw herself as someone who practiced. Small, repeated acts rewired her habit loop. A corporate example. A small non-profit replaced its January strategic overhaul with quarterly moon cycle sprints. Each quarter began with a planning ritual and ended with a gratitude share. Staff reported less fatigue, and projects completed on time increased by a measurable margin according to their internal tracking. Not because the calendar changed, but because the rhythm did. A family example. A household that previously used New Year's promises now hosts a monthly micro-check. At the first weekend of each month, everyone shares 1 micro-step and 1 help request. Parenting pressure eased, and the children learned to see progress as iterative. How to resist commercial capture while staying socially connected. Why this is important. Marketing will always try to monetize your reset moments. Practical defenses. Pre-unsubscribe, unsubscribe from promotional emails that spike around the new year. Budget buffer. Set a small no-buy rule for the week around year-end, unless the purchase is explicitly budgeted. Replace shopping with social ritual. If you want a communal thrill, use the Midnight Rebellion formats or a potluck. Ethical considerations and cultural respect. Why this needs emphasis. Calendars and rituals have deep cultural meanings for many peoples. Guidelines. Don't appropriate or dismiss other groups' rituals. When you borrow, do so with acknowledgement and humility. If you are in a position of cultural authority or influence, avoid universalizing your solution. Offer options and alternatives. Troubleshooting common resistances. Resistance. I like the spectacle. It motivates me. Response. Use spectacle as a launchpad for micro-commitments. Make the resolution small and pair it with weekly support. Resistance. I need big milestones for big projects. Response. Use compound micro-commitments to create milestone progress and schedule public launches specifically tied to milestone achievement rather than ritual pressure. Resistance. I'll lose social belonging if I don't participate. Response. Create alternative social events, a gratitude walk, a shared meal, and invite your social circle to experiment. How to use this work over the year, a suggested calendar for practice. Week 1, anytime you choose, neutralization and calendar audit. Weeks 2-5, launch a 4-week micro-improvement experiment. Month 2, moon cycle project initiation for a small creative or learning project. Quarterly, resolution graveyard review and seasonal realignment. Ongoing, weekly 5-minute review and a community check-in. Final reframing. What unlocking the ancient ritual really means. You came here because the title promised hidden mechanisms, and we've enumerated them. Historical layers that produced a focal date, psychological mechanics that generate predictable failure, economic structures that monetize repeat attempts, and social rituals that both heal and harm. Unlocking the ritual is not merely exposing it. It is refusing automatic consent and inventing a different architecture for beginnings. One small, social, iterative, and aligned with values and rhythms you control. Remember 3 principles as you move forward. 1. Smallness. Focus on tiny acts that scale identity. 2. Frequency. Replace annual punctuation with weekly punctuation. 3. Compassionate accountability. Build community practices that honor effort rather than holidays. An invitation and a single closing action. If you want a practical template, you can use on December 31st, a 1-page neutralization script, plus a 4-week micro-habit planner and a calendar audit worksheet. Subscribe or join the community linked below, and you'll get those resources. We keep the promise narrow, a tidy toolkit, weekly group check-ins, and a place to report micro-wins. A closing declaration. Use it as your last word before midnight or your first phrase in the morning. Tonight I withdraw my consent to performative rebirth. I choose steady practice, small truths, and communities that honor progress over ritual guilt. I will begin again, often, gently, and on my own terms. Say it once. Put it on a card. Let it be the hinge for the small work that follows. I'm not promising instant freedom. I'm offering a method, human-designed, historically informed, psychologically grounded, and socially anchored. Unlocking the ancient ritual means you get to decide when and how to begin. It means you reclaim time as your tool, not your judge. The rest is practice. If this matters to you, and you want a ready-made guide, the 1-page neutralizer, and the 4-week micro-habit planner, subscribe to the channel and join the community where we practice these tools together. Share this with someone who will actually use the work, not merely admire the idea. And when midnight comes, remember, the calendar can give you a moment. You must build the movement. I am sovereign now.